Welcome to the HDG Stories podcast, where we'll share our threads of memories, knowledge, experience, and history, knitting all generations into a beautiful tapestry. So please like and share, and be sure to subscribe. Now let's get started.
Hi, this is Ellie. I interviewed Jeanne Preston Hawtin on June 22, 2016. In this excerpt from her full interview, Jeanne, at 81, shares her childhood memories of standing in line at the candy store, finding a dollar bill during racetrack days, chasing the milkman, playing war, and even going with her mom to the Spot Tower. Welcome, Jeanne. Your full name?
Jeanne, Jeanne. My father and mother chose to make it a real long spelling. And everybody says it's Janine. I said, no, it's Jeanne, but it's Jeanne. And if I was a boy, I was going to be Jeanne, too. I think they both like Jeanne Autry or something. Anyway, Jeanne Preston.
Preston?
Preston. Hawtin.
And you were born?
Here, on Fountain Street, on 33035.
You were born at home?
I was born at home in the apartment house across from the church. We used to call it the Low Episcopal Church. The High Episcopal Church was St. John's, and the Low Episcopal Church was on Fountain Street. And it was Mr. Rattenbush's church, we called it. Oh, I'm sorry, it's Grace Reform. The church is Grace Reform now.
What are your earliest memories?
Washington Street. My earliest memories are Washington Street. I was so lucky because across the street on the corner was a candy store. The first time I can remember walking to the candy store, standing in line to get double bubble gum because it was World War II, and bubble gum was sort of not rationed actually, but it was, for some reason, it was hard to get, and it was the kind wrapped in paper with a little comic in it, and You're too young to know what I'm talking about.
I do remember that.
Yeah, we used to stand in line for that right across the street there.
Is that where the macaron place is now?
No, there's nothing there. There's a house there now. I lived, I don't know the number. What number would it be? Do you know where Pennington's funeral home used to be? No, it is the third block from the drugstore, South Washington. And like John Schaefer bought a house across the street, it's on the corner. It's a black house, and they redid it. And across the street was this lady that had the candy store. Then when you went another block, there was another candy store. I mean, we had
another block going towards the waters?
Going towards the park. There was the Lefflers had a store with a lot of steps that went up. I remember their store. They sold more than candy. The house on the corner just sold candy and bubble gum and stuff like that.
And this would be around when, do you know?
1935. No. The war started in 40.
Okay.
Right, so it had to be
like
40.
5 or 6.
Because I was allowed to cross the street to go to the store.
Okay.
That was my big jump. And that is where I found and owned my first dollar bill, because the racetrack people were in town. And my dad, when I found it laying on the curb, so excited. I can remember running home and telling my father, look what I found. And right away, the racetrack people are in town. Nobody would have lost a daughter.
Nobody would have
lost a daughter.
Away from it, right?
Yeah, from daughters. I had that. And we moved that year off Washington Street, around the corner to Fountain Street, 417 Fountain Street. We had an extra spare bedroom upstairs, which I always thought was for my grandmother, but every year we had the same trainer from the racetrack that boarded with us. All of our neighbors that I can remember, probably not all of them, but it seemed like all of them to me, took in boarders during the racetrack days. And this gentleman came. My Uncle Doc, who was the pharmacist, had asked my mom and dad, if he could stay there because he would come and get prescriptions filled at the drugstore and stuff, and they had been friends for years. almost all my neighbors if they had an extra bedroom, they had when the racetrack was there.
And how long were they here for the races? It's just a few weeks, wasn't it?
Yeah, they would come in the first week to get set up and stuff, and then for years, I think, you have to get somebody that can, a little older than me at the time. I thought it was for 2 weeks, and then we got cut down to a week, and then the Maryland Racing Commission, whatever, cut us down, period. And because when I was in like the 6th grade, older, because we were, at this time, all the kids in Havre Grace, we walked everywhere we wanted to go. And Concord Cove hadn't been built. You know, the Girl Scouts used to go out there and camp. It was wooded like stuff. It was so funny. My children laughed at me, but I said, we went out there and we climbed over the fence to the racetrack. The stables were there, and they had these tilted roofs, like, or whatever. We would get up on the roof and lay on the roof of the stables. I can name several people in town that did that. And we saw Betty Grable. We saw her husband, Harry James, and she had pink hair. Betty Grable had pink hair because they had horse races, and they raced at Havre Grace. We would lay on the roof like that, and one time we got chased, but for a couple of years we didn't get chased. The racetrack was good. A lot of my friends, like when we were 13 or 14, older, the boys were really lucky. They got jobs parking cars, not driving the cars, but they worked on these parking. When you went into the racetrack, on the right were these big parking lots, and the boys directed the cars to go. And so a lot of the boys, Merle Hadry, and I can't think of all of them that worked out there, really look forward to it, because some rich people would come and give them tips, you know, and stuff. So the girls always were very jealous of the boys getting to do that. They did. That was neat. I mean, everybody dressed up to go to the races.
To the races themselves?
My mother had spectators that she just saved for the races, and they were white shoes with the brown leather toe and the leather heel, brown, white, and they were called spectators. I don't know why, but maybe because they were spectating. Everyone dressed to go. The racetrack was everything to the town for extra money. And talk about tourists. That was our first tourist, really. And of course, it was very short. And as I recall, but you'll have to check history, we had the 2-week session and twice a year, and they cut us a year and then cut us a week and then gone. It was very, very sad to see them take over. And we used to have balls out there when I was older, when I was a teenager. We had formal balls out there, dance at the clubhouse. Walking up the long steps, I don't know if it's still there. Is the clubhouse still there? I don't know.
It is. It's because that's where they had the Grade Gala. When they had the gala.
You go up all these steps. I just remember the steps. I can clearly see the steps we had to go.
And what kind of dances would those be for?
We had the Elks Club in Havre Grace. Every year had a charity ball out there. It was called the Charity Ball. Other clubs would have, or I just know Eddie Dwyer had a band, and his band would play out there. And as I said, the times that I went was actually formal. I mean, we had long dresses on. That Charity Ball was formal. But the rest of them, I really can't remember for what. There's something about milk. There was a dance of something about milk. I don't know if it was for poor people or milk for me. I don't know, because Mount Ararat brought us our milk. I mean, that's where we bought milk, was from Mount Ararat. The milkman came. The milk, that's another thing. On Washington Street, on Fountain Street days, besides being so lucky to be close to a candy store, Mr. Colburn, who lived on the hill, going up 155 on the left, was a farm. And he raised goats, and he sold goat milk too. But he was the Iceman. You know, Mr. Colburn was the iceman. Everybody had ice boxes, and you had a sign you put in your window if you wanted
them to drop some off?
They come in and put the ice in the bottom of the ice box, and you get a half of whatever you call that, or a big thing.
The big cubes.
And we followed him around town. We followed him because that was the hardest ice I haven't had ice like that since I was a kid. And when he would chop the ice, there'd be slivers that were triangle shaped. And he would give us, that was the biggest treat, and we'd hold on to that ice and suck and he'd chip the ice in the summertime, of course. But the ice, and following the Iceman was a big deal. And it was Mr. Colburn, and there'd be 4 or 5 of us behind the truck waiting for him to chop. Lots of, Pennington's funeral home was right there. And we all tried to look in the windows to see if we saw a dead body.
See who was brave enough.
Yeah. And we played all day. And one of the funniest things, my kids, of course, being stuck on computers constantly, we played, there's a card game called War. This is so funny. It lasts a really long time. Couple of days this war game would last, and it was me and the Drennans and Jesse Smith, his father was mayor at one time, Charles Duffy, the Van Evers, the Drennans. We all would sit under this tree behind where Bobby Gall lives and play this war game. And I actually, at the end of the day, when we all had to be home when the street lights came on, at the end of the day, we would take our hand home that we still had, and I actually put it under my pillow when I went to sleep. I don't know who I thought was going to creep in my house and get my cards, but
So funny.
I put my war cards under the pillow. And Sonny Smith, Jesse Smith, like I said, his father was married to Rosanna Pennington, and it was his backyard that we played in all the time. We could walk anywhere. In first grade, we walked to school. Now I see the kids all being driven, or parents are letting them off, or they actually get on a school bus. We all walked to school. And the library was about as big as this apartment, and it was up in the first floor of the Opera House. The library was there. I used to get to that library Saturday morning. I would run up the street and go try to get to the library before Nina Pascalina Williams did, because we both read the same books that we liked. Nancy Drew. We'd get a new Nancy Drew book and at the library. But it was so much fun to be a kid then. We ice skated. Of course, we ice skated at the park, and we skated to Perryville.
So you skated across the river?
Yes, and the channel part of the river out there. In fact, that's another thing about when my Uncle Doc had his heart attack, the pharmacist at Green Store. My cousin Docky and I were skating that day, and my father was petrified of the ice. My father didn't like the ice. And we were skating towards Perryville from the park. We looked around, and it looked like my father walking across the ice, like someone would walk on ice. And Docky said, "That's Uncle Henry, my father." And I said, "Oh my God." So we turned around and went back, and he was coming after Docky because my uncle had had a massive heart attack. And my Aunt Nellie wanted little Docky, we called him, wanted him there. But out where the channel was out there, the ice was sort of dark green, and it had bubbles, ice bubbles. Mm-hmm. Have you skated like that? They have foamy ice bubbles, and if you hit the ice bubble with the toe of your ice, it popped, and then there was a hole. So you had to learn very quickly when you were young, stay away from the bubbles. But the ice was, we'd get on, this was so funny. We would get on down at the park. Down at the park, we would sit on the pier, and our feet would be on the ice, right? And we're putting our skates on and everything, and we would go. The men in Havre de Grace, some of the people that Mr. Baines that owned a little 5 and 10, all of them, The men skated. They played hockey right in front of John Carrier's house. You know where that is?
Yeah.
There was a cove there, and they had barrels. They had up to 3 barrels that they would put on the ice down there to see who could jump the barrels. The men, the older people, skated in the cove, and that's where they played hockey. It was in the cove. But I would sit, like I said, put on my skates, right? And the island at the park, the little island at the park, we would skate over there, and we could actually build a fire on the edge of the ice by the island, and we could go there to get warmed up. The ice was so that we could put wood on it and build a fire. And then, this is the part that's really wild. Anybody that lived here and skated would tell you this is true. Then we would have to go, we'd skate for hours, right? And then we'd have to go as far out on the left or right of the island to get speed up, because we had to go really, really fast and hop up on our stomachs to the pier, because the tide would go out and the ice would go down. And that's the only way we would get. I can remember so many times hitting my stomach trying to get up on that pier. But yes, you could skate to Perryville. But we did that, and it was exciting. Like during the war, there was a spot tower on the hill here.
A what tower?
A spot tower. There's one I know left that's over in Perryville. There's a spot tower. It's called Spot Tower. It's a real tall tower with steps up to the top, and it's just a little building with a little.
What do they use them for?
Spot German plane. Spot planes.
So it was a real spot tower.
It was a spot tower. And my mom, and I still have her buttons and stuff, my mom was on the spot tower. This was really early. I mean, this was...
Like Civil Air Patrol or something like that?
Yeah, there were 2 people always. It was all volunteer. And it was 2 people. Mr. Mitchell, Madison Mitchell, was the chairman, was the head of it. And he did the schedule for everybody. And my mom would take my doll and coloring book and crayons. And I went up those scariest steps. Those like fire escape steps. Yeah, because I can't stand to the steps to this day that you can see through. Yeah. I can't stand them. And we would go up, and I would just lay on the floor up there. And my mom would have her, and whoever was with her at the time, every time, it could be somebody different, And they had this phone, and if they saw a plane and it didn't have U.S. or whatever on it, they had to call whoever that was checking on the planes. But we were checking for German.
So there was one here in Havre?
Oh, yeah. Do you know where St. Patrick's Cemetery is?
Yes.
That's right. It was right up there.
Yeah.
It was up there by the cemetery. And we did that quite often. And my mother was the warden for the Washington Fountain Street block at nighttime, because we had green shade. We had the window shades, right?
To block light.
Block light. What were they called? They were dark green. My mom, and sometimes my dad and I walked with her, but mostly it was her. She had a uniform and a hat, the whole bit. I think Mr. Mitchell was in charge of that too. She had that block that she would go around: Fountain Street, Washington Street, Bourbon Street, back to Fountain on Union. That block was her block. Everybody had a block. She had to make sure that everybody had their curtains. There was a name for those curtains. I mean blinds. I can't think what the name of the blind was. And it did. It made it completely dark, because supposedly we had a German sub come up into Bush River. And so they were...
Figured that was close enough.
That was close enough. But the spot tower, there's one left that I know of in Perryville, to the left, Far Tower Road. Perryville, Cecil County is using it during dry weather and stuff as Far Tower. But it was originally built as a spot tower.
Thank you, Jeanne. If you'd like to hear the full-length interview, go to our subscribe page on the website. There's a special deal until December 15th, 2016. Have a great week till our next chat.
We hope you've enjoyed today's HDG Stories podcast. We encourage you to subscribe. We hope you will share with your friends. Till the next story, we invite you to visit us at hdgstories.com.